Greetings, comrades! Listen to this correspondence from the fall of 1915. Greetings to you, dear Ilic, warmest of greetings, yours, Koba. In response, Ilic asked his close friend Grigory, do you happen to remember Koba's surname? But Grigory did not recall it. Then Ilic wrote to another acquaintance, dear VK, I have a big favor to ask. Please find out from Stepko, Miha, etc. the surname of Koba, Iosif Dj, we've forgotten. It is very important, VI. Okay, enough confusing you with all these people. Stepko, Miha, Koba, Ilic. What are these nicknames? Let me reveal some details. Grigory's real name is Avsei Radomylsky. Ilic, aka VI, is Vladimir Ulyanov, and the mysterious Koba is, of course, Iosif Djugashvili. Is everything clear now? Still no? Okay, you probably better know Ilic Vladimir Ulyanov as Vladimir Lenin, Avsei Radomylsky as his closest comrade-in-arms Grigory Zinoviev, and Koba Djugashvili, of course, as the fearsome Joseph Stalin. The fact is that among the founding fathers of the great Soviet state, there are virtually no people who did so under their real first and last names. All the names we know, all the entries in history textbooks, on monuments and on city maps, these are pseudonyms, and among themselves they communicated using some sort of semi-childish, semi-criminal nicknames. Old Man, Saso, Quill. There was even a very influential Bolshevik, future foreign minister, named Stone Ass. Let's figure out just how this came to be. Well, let's start of course with Grandpa Lenin. Naturally, for a figure of such stature, a single pseudonym would not suffice, which is why there is an absolutely amazing piece of fundamental research by Israel Naumovich Volper, aptly titled Lenin's Pseudonyms. It is 110 pages long, and the appendix listing the pseudonyms themselves looks like this. And then there's a second appendix containing pseudonyms and nicknames not included in the first one, while you'll find the absolutely amazing Senor Drin Drin and Tyapkin Lyapkin. In total, Vladimir Ulyanov, the leader of the world proletariat, had 146 of them, 17 foreign and 129 Russian. That's about 5 times more than Joseph Stalin had, but more on him later. Why did the Bolsheviks need nicknames in the first place? For the sake of secrecy, of course. We should not forget how they came to power, through the 1917 revolution. They were an underground organization, and it would never have occurred to anyone to use their real name there, especially in the early days, where the Bolshevik party was no different from the hundreds of other secret groups operating within the empire. For the same reason, to maintain secrecy, a revolutionary would often use several aliases at once. One was used for personal communication within the underground network, another served as a pen name for newspaper articles, some were used for one-time communications to avoid drawing attention to the main one, yet another was used at the party congress, and so on. They were deliberately kept separate to make it more difficult for the police to identify an underground activist operating in a specific location with a delegate to the Congress and the author of articles in party publications, and to bring these combined charges against him. In addition, members of the underground often used forged documents or simply other people's passports, which is why they sometimes went by such a false surname. The story of Lev Trotsky, for example, is Stalin. When he was first arrested in Odessa in 1898, Nikolai Trotsky was a senior guard at the local prison. The 19-year-old was deeply impressed by the guard's imposing figure, authority and ability to command respect. When Lev escaped for the first time, he obtained a blank passport form and wrote the surname Trotsky there himself, as if in retaliation against the guard for his dictatorial tendencies. To prove to everyone that the surname of a seasoned defender of autocracy could also serve other purposes – revolution. In revolutionary circles, however, he went by a different pseudonym – Pierrot, Quill, due to his literary talents which had come to light in his articles for the revolutionary newspaper Iskra. But of course, the most famous stolen identity of them all belongs to the leader himself, Vladimir Lenin. Of all his 150 pseudonyms, it was Lenin that he began to use most frequently in his public writings starting in 1901. more precisely N. Lenin. He used this name, for example, to sign his 1902 pamphlet What is to be Done, which brought him widespread public recognition. Even after becoming the country's leader, he signed official party and state documents as V.I. Ulyanov Lenin, so people would firmly associate the author of those revolutionary works they had read with this bold, funny little man. But still, why Lenin? The most plausible theory is that Vladimir Ilyich used the passport of a real person named Nikolai Lenin for his shady dealings. In 1900, when Ulyanov needed to travel abroad and required forged documents, one of Lenin's female friends gave him her recently deceased father's passport. Nikolai Yegorovich Lenin was a wealthy retired state councillor. Ulyanov simply altered the year of birth to 1870 and began using the new name. And then, when in exile, he became so attached to his alter ego that he adopted the surname. To be honest, there are dozens of other theories about the origin of this pseudonym. For example, his wife Nadezhda Krupskaya recalled that on his way to his first exile in 1898, Vladimir read Leo Tolstoy's novella The Cossacks, in which a character named Lenin is sent into exile in the Caucasus. Perhaps the last name was taken from there, or from the female name Yelena. Pseudonyms derived from common names were the most popular in revolutionary circles, so Vladimir Ilyich might have chosen the pseudonym Lena in honor of Yelena, some secret lover, or the river. Olga Ulyanova, Lenin's niece, recalled, "I have a reason to believe," my father wrote, "that his pseudonym derives from the name of the Lena River." Vladimir Ilyich did not take the pseudonym Volgin as it was already quite overused, in particular as well known Plekhanov and other authors had used it. Vladimir Volgin, what a name that could be. There is even a theory linking the pseudonym to the daughters of Lenin's comrade Pantelimon Lepeshinsky, whom he met during his exile in Siberia. He had two daughters, Oля and Lena. Vladimir Ilyich spent a lot of time with them, and the younger one, Lena, even called him Dad. Lenin and Lepeshinsky allegedly agreed among themselves that after they were released, they would publish their first works as Olin and Lenin, that is, Olya's and Lena's fathers. After fleeing to Switzerland, Lepeshinsky did indeed sign his name as Olin. Finally, here's the most amusing version, from the avant-garde artist Kazimir Malevich. Vladimir Ulyanov believed that human beings are creatures inherently prone to laziness, lень in Russian. But the cornerstone of communist ideology is its antithesis, labor. And to remind himself and everyone around him of the need for a constant struggle against laziness, he chose the name Lenin. The story behind Joseph Stalin's name is a bit different. Initially, he was known in revolutionary circles simply as Saso, a diminutive form of his real name, Iosif. It's like Bill from William. Later he adopted the nickname Koba, by which he became known in the Transcaucasian party underground. That was the name of the hero in one of the novels by the Georgian classic Alexander Kazbegi, The Patricide. In it, the fearless Koba, a highland peasant, fought for his homeland's independence, and Joseph, of course, identified with the hero. However, as early as 1911, it became necessary to change his primary alias due to political circumstances. Djugashvili's activities had begun to extend far beyond the Transcaucasian region, and his ambitions and ties to Russian party organizations were growing. Koba was only suitable as an alias in the Caucasus, so he needed something that sounded more authoritative, tough, and most importantly, Russian. That's why he chose the surname Stalin, derived from the word stal, steel. Iosif Stalin, Joe Steel. Pretty cool. Rumors also say that Stalin was chosen because it sounds somewhat similar to Lenin, and in this way Joseph wanted to show his closeness to the leader of the revolution. The desire to appear more Russian seems to be one of the main motivations for changing one's name among other Bolshevik party officials as well. Clearly, Vladimir Ulyanov had no need to do so, his surname is already Russian. But Avsei Aronovich Radomylsky, whom I mentioned at the beginning of the video, an obviously Jewish man, became a Russian named Grigory Zinoviev. Lev Bronstein became Lev Trotsky. Lev Rosenfeld became Lev Kamenev. Meir Genach Moiseyevich Wallach became Maxim Litvinov, and Yuli Tsuderbaum became Lev Martov. A perfect excuse for conspiracy theories to claim 100 years later that the Bolshevik revolution was actually a Jewish conspiracy. Moreover, many leaders wanted to appear more down to earth. That is why some of their pseudonyms have a distinctly working-class feel to them. Kamenev, Stone, Molotov, Hammer, and even Stalin. Fun fact, the nickname Stone Ass didn't belong to Kamenev, the man of stone. It actually belonged to Molotov. Apparently he got it from Lenin himself for his diligence and ability to work tirelessly behind the desk. By the way, oddly enough, Molotov was not Jewish. He had a thoroughly Russian surname, Skryabin. It's just that poor Vyacheslav had stuttered since his youth, and he simply couldn't manage the first 3 sounds of his own surname. Molotov was much easier to pronounce. Oh, and what about female revolutionaries? Did they follow the same principle and adopt new names? You can find the answer in an exclusive post on my Patreon page. Subscribe now. Over time, the need for secrecy disappeared. Later Soviet leaders, Khrushchev, Brezhnev, Gorbachev, ruled under their real names. But the tradition of giving leaders nicknames did not disappear. It was just that now these names were not chosen by the leaders themselves, but by the people. And they were by no means always flattering. Yes, Lenin was still mostly affectionately referred to as Grandpa, presumably because of his wisdom and mentorship, since he actually had no grandchildren or children. He died at the age of 53 and was in fact only 8 years older than Stalin himself. Soviet propaganda deliberately cultivated this grandfather image. After all, if the country had a grandfather, it made sense that it also had a father, and that is exactly when Stalin began to be called the father of nations. But behind his back, people called Stalin much less flattering nicknames. Riboy, Spotty, Ryzhy, Red Hat, Yosia the Terrible, and even Gutalinchik, because he was a son of a shoemaker. Khrushchev was nicknamed Khryak Bo because of his appearance, and Kukuruznik Corn Man because of his love for corn. Brezhnev Бровеносец в потемках, the eyebrow bearer in the dark, an untranslatable pun linking his eyebrows to the famous ship and film of the same name. Or twice Ilic of the Soviet Union, for his penchant for a warden himself. But the biggest harvest of scathing nicknames was collected by the last Soviet General Secretary, Mikhail Gorbachev. He was the marked one for the huge mole on his bald spot, the bold one obviously, and Mishka Gavarun, Chatterbear, for his love of long-winded speeches. And of course, Mineral Secretary and Lemonade Joe, for his failed anti-alcohol campaign. Many pro-Soviet authors view the widespread use of pseudonyms and aliases among early Bolsheviks as yet another symbol of their defiance against the old system and the old world. By discarding their real names, they also cast aside their past, stepping toward a bright socialist future. But in general, it is worth noting that pseudonyms are quite common among famous people, and at various times they have been widely used by writers, musicians, actors, and other members of the creative professions. However, pseudonyms are always masks, and their purpose varies depending on the wearer's goals. Sometimes this mask is meant to conceal certain hidden aspects of a person's character, or obscure part of their history, sometimes to embellish the truth or create an air of mystery, and sometimes to highlight certain key qualities through which the person wishes to stand out. So, what did the leaders of the socialist revolution want to hide and emphasize? Their origins? Their closeness to the common people? Their true motives? Decide for yourself. Thanks for watching, and as always, a huge shout out to my biggest supporters: Yelizaveta Zakharova, Kirill, Klimuk, Petar, Ilic, Lyudmila Ulyanova, Jonathan Sheltze, and one more member who wished to remain anonymous. See you guys next time.